Good morning, YouTube. It is 10 a.m. in the great state of Texas, and yes, we are working with pine board again because I'm a big fan of using it. Some people who turn wood might not be a big fan of it, but I use it because I have it, and we're going to make something cool out of it today. So, continuation from last week's project where we took some pine boards and made a bowl out of it. We're going to pretty much be doing something similar to that. We're just going to be using a little bit different technique. So, had these pine boards left over from a previous project. If you went back and saw last week's project, we made a bowl using some pine boards and did like a pretty cool inlay kind of technique using a Dremel. So we're kind of going to do the same thing, but not really, but we're going to add some epoxy to kind of spice things up a little bit. So we got a mold, made some cool circles. Now we're just over here on the bandsaw cutting this into circles. I feel like this really saves a lot of time. If you have the tools, go ahead and use them, and that's what we did there. So we got everything in a circle, cut everything out, and now all we're doing is mixing up our glue. If you're asking why this looks like porridge, it's because it's 1,000 degrees in the state of Texas, and if you leave your glue out in an uncontrolled environment with heat, it's going to turn your glue into porridge. So you got to pour it into a different container, mix it up really good, and then you got to apply it that way because that's the only way it's going to work. And then you got to go take some vice grips and you got to clamp it down for at least 24 hours. I think we set this up for like 2 to 3 days before we ended up working on it. And this part went really cool. Just use a bunch of grips to make sure that the glue adheres, especially on the wood that's uneven, because I didn't put these through the planer, so you just want to grip those down as best as possible. And there's a little bit of glue out. You can see it getting all over our silicone mat there, but not a whole lot of issues here. I think this actually looks really cool. So once we got that set up after like 2 or 3 days, now we're just taking everything out of the grips, and we got this cool cylindrical cheese block. And you can see all the glue on the side there. So then we come over, get our faceplate on there so we can get it over to the lathe, and we're going to spin this down into like a nice cylindrical shape and make a cool little bowl out of it. So usually back in the day, like when I first got into woodworking, I would just keep everything in squares and wouldn't use the bandsaw, and I don't know why I never used the bandsaw to cut everything out into a circle. I feel like it saves a lot of time. It doesn't vibrate the lathe as much, and it's just a better technique to use. So if you have the tools out there, go ahead and use them. So this really saved me a lot of time. This took no time at all, just using the round carbide tool to get everything nice and flat. You can see that we're making that concave shape on the bottom so we can get everything into that nice cool looking bowl shape that we typically will use here. And that's all we're doing, and it's really soft wood working with pine, and I didn't have a lot of issues with it. You can see all the wood shavings there, so I was really happy how this one ended up turning out, and just like a simple basic bowl kind of shape, and just coming back and edging everything out, making sure everything is nice and smooth, and pretty happy with how this turned out right there. So now all we're going to do is make the mortise, get everything sized up really well so we can go ahead and reverse it onto the chuck here. And usually I use the smaller tools for this part of it, but the large tools with the pine just went right through it like butter, so we didn't have a lot of issues there, and this part went relatively smooth. So all we're going to do here is take the faceplate off, get this reversed on the chuck, and then we'll start our little different technique that we're going to use here. And I can't remember where I saw this initially. I know other turners have done projects like this, so I'm not exactly remembering where I first saw it, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to do this, but I saw this maybe on Instagram, and it looked pretty cool, so I decided, you know what, I can go ahead and do it too. And all we're doing is taking the parting tool, making like a rim on the side of the bowl, and gouging out the middle, and then we're just going to add epoxy to the middle portion of it, and kind of give it like a cool little lip technique, I guess, is the way to do it. And the gouging part took no time at all. Round and square carbide tool, ate through it really, really easy. Not a whole lot of problems here. And all we're doing here is just getting to a nice depth. Was pretty happy with where we're at, and just coming up and finishing up some edge work, making sure all the glue is off of it and that we're at a nice depth, but we're not punching through the actual epoxy or punching through to the mortise itself. And this part literally took no time at all. I think the finer work took a little bit longer, and all I'm doing here is stopping and starting the lathe, making sure that the glue has been taken off of it. But overall, really happy how this part turned out. Not a whole lot of issues here, and I'm surprised the lip of the bowl didn't chip out, which sometimes will happen, which which was what I was kind of expecting. So all we're doing here is sanding everything down, going from 120 to 180. Didn't spend a whole lot of time sanding anything down. This part went relatively fast, not a whole lot of problems here. You can see all the cool wood shavings, and this looks just like a plain Jane kind of bowl. And there's the shavings itself. I need to save some of these shavings so I can do a sawdust bowl. Those seem to be pretty popular, and I like doing those. But this part took no time at all, and we're just going to give it a little bit of character because that seems to be a common theme here. If I ever work with pine, I'm going to burn it because I can't think of anything else to do to kind of give pine some character, because it's so boring of a wood. Like, as easy as it is to work with, it's kind of boring. But then I went ahead and sprayed it with some lacquer. I should have took it over to the lathe and sanded it down a little bit to get the soot off of it, but I was like, man, I'll just lacquer it up, it'll be fine. So we did that a couple of times, and the wood kind of chipped out a little bit from when we burned it, so it cracked it. So we want to hold the epoxy in there, so I'm just adding a little bit of hot glue there to make sure it doesn't pour out. And all we're doing is coming over here. I had this leftover epoxy, and I did a horrible job eyeballing this. There's actually like lines on there, but it just was already uneven, and I could tell it wasn't going to work. So I had to come back, get a different cup, pour the 1-to-1 epoxy in there. So this part was a little bit more problematic because it didn't work out exactly how I envisioned. Add some pigment in there using that black diamond, which is really, really good. Would recommend. Make sure everything's nice and balanced, and then I started adding the epoxy to the edge of it. And this part, for my first time doing this technique, went really, really good. I just came back and wiped down the part of the epoxy that kind of folded off. And once we let that dry for about an hour or two, actually a lot longer, it was like maybe a full 24 hours, then we came back, started wiping things down, trying to get the soot off of it. And I need to come back and apply some more lacquer here in a little bit. But you can see the cool blue inlay. I think that looks really, really cool. Nice little fun technique that I've been using. But then I came back, sprayed it with some more lacquer. Not a whole lot of issues here, but I really enjoyed this project. Hope you guys do as well. We'll be doing some stuff like this in the future. But overall, really happy how this turned out. Just something different. I don't like to throw away wood, and if I have the scrap, I'm going to figure out something to do with it. So hope you guys liked it. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. And I'll see you guys in the next one. All right. Peace. Alright, so project is done. So this guy looks absolutely gorgeous. So you guys saw me do a previous project where we just put holes in everything, and I just wanted to do this cool line thing here. And I wish I would have picked a brighter color. Don't worry, there's going to be another one. We're going to do some bright colors. But it looks really cool. So the technique I kind of have down. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. But I really, really like how this looks. It really makes the pine, I don't know, gives it a little accent piece essentially, but looks really, really cool. So overall, happy how this turned out, because pine is boring and you really got to do something special to it to kind of like make it pop or whatever. So really happy how that turned out. Today is September 1st. You guys are watching this 2 weeks from now. It's Labor Day weekend, so I'm doing a whole bunch of videos this weekend trying to get content pushed out for the channel. So we have one project at least a week. And it is 90 plus degrees in my garage right now, or my little shop. It's like almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But hope you guys liked it. Hope you got something out of it. Yeah, so I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, peace.